Hello friends. Welcome to the DXD Tales. How are you all? So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Issei became the Supreme Dragon Emperor of the Abyss. Also be sure to subscribe and like this video. Now let's begin. Chapter 1. The Awakening Within the Void. Death wasn't supposed to feel like sinking. I always imagined it would be quick, a flash of pain followed by darkness or light, depending on which afterlife stories you believed. Instead, I felt myself falling through something thicker than air but lighter than water. My consciousness stretched thin like a thread unwinding from a spool. The last thing I remembered was the ritual circle. Devils surrounding me, their expressions caught between determination and fear. Rias reaching toward me, crimson hair floating as if underwater, mouth open in a scream I couldn't hear. The sacred gear inside me, Ddraig, the Red Dragon Emperor, pulsing with desperate energy as ancient symbols carved into the ground beneath me began to glow with sickly purple light. The seal must be permanent, a voice had said. The dragons cannot be allowed to rise again. Then pain. Not the clean slice of a blade or the burning punch of magic, but something worse, the sensation of being unraveled from the inside, my very soul being pulled apart strand by strand. I'd screamed until my voice gave out, until the darkness rushed in to claim me. But death hadn't come. Instead, I continued to sink through an endless void, conscious but unable to move. Time seemed meaningless here. Had it been minutes, hours, days, the only constant was the pressure. Not crushing, but omnipresent, as if the very fabric of this place was aware of me, studying me, weighing me. Interesting, something whispered. The voice seemingly coming from everywhere and nowhere. You were neither one thing nor another. I tried to speak but found I had no mouth, no body at all. I existed as pure consciousness, floating in an abyss of absolute darkness. The seal was meant to trap the dragon, the voice continued, but they made a fundamental error. They failed to understand what you have become together. Who are you? I thought, pushing the question outward into the void. I am what remains. I am what was forgotten. I am the memory of the first scale that ever formed from the void. The pressure around me shifted, condensing, taking shape. For the first time since I'd arrived in this place, I felt a direction, down, as gravity seemed to assert itself. My consciousness began to coalesce, forming something like a body again. I gasped as lungs I didn't know I had filled with air that shouldn't exist in this place. I blinked eyes that were mine but somehow different, adjusting to the darkness that now seemed less absolute. Faint, bluish lights pulsed in the distance like dying stars, providing just enough illumination to make out vague shapes in the void around me. Where am I? My voice sounded strange to my ears. Deeper and with an odd resonance, as if several voices spoke in perfect unison. The abyss. The birthplace of dragons. The void that existed before creation properly began. As my eyes adjusted further, I realized I was standing on what appeared to be solid ground. A vast plain of black stone that seemed to drink in what little light existed. The horizon, if it could be called that, curved strangely, suggesting this realm followed different physical laws than the world I knew. Am I dead? I asked, looking down at my hands. They looked human enough, but when I concentrated, I could see faint red scales beneath the skin, pulsing with their own inner light. Not dead, transformed. The ritual that was meant to seal away the dragon power forever has instead opened. A door that has been closed for millennia. You stand at a threshold, Issei Hyodo. Neither human nor dragon, but something that belongs to both worlds and neither. I tried to reach for Ddraig's presence in my mind, the constant companion since I'd awakened the boosted gear, but found something different. Not the distinct personality I had grown used to, but something vaster, more primal, as if Ddraig had been merely the surface of an ocean whose depths I was only now beginning to perceive. Ddraig, I called out, both aloud and within my mind. Are you there? The response wasn't words but a flood of images, sensations, and emotions that nearly brought me to my knees. Ancient memories not my own rushed through my consciousness, the birth of stars, the forming of worlds, the first dragons emerging from the primal chaos. Civilizations rising and falling across countless realities. I saw great wars between beings of light and darkness, witnessed powers that could reshape reality with a thought. and felt the crushing weight of time beyond human comprehension. What's happening to me? I gasped, clutching my head as the deluge of information threatened to overwhelm my sanity. *TH. Walls between you and the dragon have dissolved, the voice explained. What was once two beings awkwardly sharing one vessel has begun to become something new. Something that has not existed since the first age of creation. You are becoming an emperor of the abyss. The flood of memories began to organize themselves in my mind, slotting into place like puzzle pieces, no longer overwhelming but becoming accessible. As if my consciousness was expanding to accommodate them. The ritual, I said slowly, trying to make sense of what had happened. They wanted to remove Ddraig from the cycle permanently. To break the pattern of the sacred gear passing from one host to another. Yes, the three factions have long feared the return of dragon dominance. The sacred gears were a compromise, a way to harness dragon power while keeping it controlled, diluted through human vessels. But you proved too adaptable, too quickly growing in strength. They feared what you might become. I laughed bitterly. So they tried to kill me and seal away Ddraig forever. And instead delivered you both directly to the source of all dragon power. An unforeseen consequence. As my vision continued to adjust to this strange place, I noticed something in the distance, a structure of some kind, rising from the black stone plain. Without consciously deciding to, I began walking toward it, my body moving. With a grace and strength I had never possessed before. You still haven't told me who you are, I said to the presence that seemed to permeate this realm. Names have power here, the voice replied. And I have had many. You may consider me a custodian of sorts. One who remembers what others have forgotten. As I drew closer to the structure, I realized it was some kind of temple or monument. Vast columns of black stone veined with pulsing blue energy, supporting a roof that seemed to fold in on itself in geometrically impossible ways. The architecture defied logic, angles connecting in ways that shouldn't be possible. Creating a structure that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the three I was capable of perceiving. What is this place? I asked, stopping at the foot of steps that led up to the temple's entrance. A nexus, a place where the layers of the abyss connect. And a prison, that last word hung in the air ominously. A prison for what, not what, who, or ran through the ground beneath my feet, and for a moment, the blue veins of energy in the temple columns flared brighter. I felt a presence, different from the voice that had been guiding me, more focused. More individual, stirring within the structure. She has sensed your arrival, the voice said. After all these centuries, she feels the presence of another dragon emperor. Who is she? I asked, though something in my new memories was already providing an answer, a name rising to the surface of my consciousness. Tiamat, the Chaos Karma Dragon, the Azure Dragon Emperor of the Sea. She, who challenged Ddraig and Albion at the height of their powers and was imprisoned for her defiance. The name resonated through me, connecting with fragments of Ddraig's memories. I saw flashes of a massive dragon with scales the deep blue of ocean depths, eyes filled with ancient wisdom and terrible power, wings that could summon tsunamis with a single beat. She's been imprisoned here, for how long? Since before humans learned to forge metal. Since before the three factions established their dominion. She is perhaps the oldest living dragon in existence, and among the most powerful. Another tremor, stronger this time, shook the temple. A crack appeared in one of the columns, blue energy spilling out like blood from a wound. Her prison weakens, the voice observed. Your presence disrupts the ancient seals. The question now, young emperor, is what you will do about it. I stood at the base of the steps, feeling the weight of a decision I didn't fully understand. Everything about my situation was beyond my experience. This impossible realm, the memories that weren't mine yet now resided in my mind, the transformation of my body and consciousness into something neither human nor dragon. Yet despite all this disorientation, I felt a clarity I had never known before. The old Issei, the high school student with simple dreams and limited ambitions, seemed like a character in a story I'd read long ago. In his place stood someone new, someone who could perceive the currents of power flowing through reality itself, who could sense the fragile balances and ancient pacts that structured the supernatural world. I'm going to free her, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. That decision may have consequences beyond what you can foresee, the voice cautioned. Tiamat has harbored her grudge against Didraig for millennia. And now you carry his power, his essence. I'm not just Didraig anymore, I replied, taking the first step up the staircase. And I'm not just Issei either. Whatever I'm becoming, I think I need to understand all the pieces of dragon history to make sense of it. Including the parts that were imprisoned and forgotten. The voice was silent for a long moment. Then, your instincts serve you well, young emperor. But proceed with caution. Even bound, Tiamat is no less dangerous than she was at the height of her power. I climbed the steps, each one wider and taller than human architecture would allow, clearly designed for beings larger than myself. As I approached the entrance to the temple, the blue energy running through the stone pulsed faster. Like a heartbeat accelerating in anticipation. The entrance was a vast archway, its surface covered in symbols I had never seen before yet somehow recognized, the ancient language of dragons. Predating all human writing systems. I reached out, tracing one of the symbols with my finger, and felt power respond to my touch, recognizing something in me that had the right to be here. Inside, the temple was a single vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadows above. At its center stood a column of blue energy, pulsing and shifting, contained within a complex array of onyx circles that floated in the air without visible support. Within this column, I could make out a silhouette, a draconic form, massive and elegant, curled in upon itself as if sleeping. As I approached, the figure within the energy column stirred. Eyes opened, brilliant sapphire orbs that fixed upon me with an intelligence and intensity that made me freeze in place. So, a voice spoke directly into my mind, feminine but ancient. Carrying the weight of eons, the Red One sends his vessel to gloat over my imprisonment. How predictable. I'm not here to gloat, I said, finding my voice. I'm not exactly Didraig's vessel anymore. Something changed. The eyes narrowed, studying me more carefully. Yes, I see it now. You carry his power, but not as the previous wielders did. The boundaries have dissolved. Interesting. What are you called? Dragon child. Issei Hyodo. Issei, she repeated, the name sounding strange in her ancient voice. Why have you come to my prison, Issei, who is and is not Didraig? I stepped closer to the column of energy, close enough to see more details of the dragon within. Her scales were indeed the deep blue of the ocean abyss, but with RNS-like constellations running across them in lighter shades. She was smaller than I had imagined from the memories, perhaps the size of a city bus rather than the mountain-sized behemoth from Didraig's ancient recollections, but her presence was no less overwhelming. I came here by accident, I admitted. There was a ritual meant to seal Didraig away permanently. It went wrong. I ended up here, in the abyss. The three factions still fear dragonkind, it seems, Tiamat observed. Some things never change, across all the long centuries. And now you stand before the proof of their fear, a Drago. An empress sealed away at the height of her power, forgotten by the world above. Why did they imprison you here? I asked, though fragments of the answer were already forming in my mind from the scattered memories I had inherited. Tiamat's laugh was like ice cracking. Because I refused to choose sides in their petty wars. Because I suggested that dragons should rule themselves rather than serve angels, devils, or fallen. But mostly because I challenged the dominance of the two heavenly dragons and nearly prevailed. Her massive form shifted within the column. Didraig and Albion were content to battle each other eternally. Caring nothing for the fate of Dragonkind. I sought to unify our race under a single ruler. For this crime, I was bound here, while they continued their pointless duel until the God of the Bible sealed them into sacred gears. I absorbed this information, comparing it with the fragments I had from Didraig's perspective. There was truth in what she said, but also omissions, the destruction her war of unification had caused, the younger dragons forced to choose sides or be destroyed. History, I was learning, had many facets, none of them complete on their own. And now, I asked, if you were freed, what would you do? An interesting hypothetical, she replied, her voice cooler. Do you taunt me with possibilities, young one? No, I'm genuinely asking. I met her sapphire gaze directly. Because I think I can free you. The energy column pulsed violently, and I felt Tiamat's shock reverberate through the chamber. You would release me. Why? What old you possibly gain from such an action? I considered the question carefully. The old Issei might have given an impulsive answer, driven by emotion or simple curiosity. But the being I was becoming thought in terms of patterns and consequences, seeing ripples spreading outward through time from every action. The world has changed since you were imprisoned, I said finally. The balance of power between factions is shifting. Dragons are fewer, scattered, many in hiding. The knowledge you possess, about what dragons once were, about the abyss itself, that knowledge is needed. And, I hesitated, then decided on honesty. I'm lost, caught between human and dragon, without a clear understanding of either. I could use a guide who knows this realm. Tiamat was silent for a long moment, her eyes never leaving mine. Assessing and calculating. Finally, she spoke. A pragmatic answer. Better than I expected. But freeing me will not be simple. The seals that bind me were created by beings who have long since passed from existence. They are woven into the fabric of this level of the abyss itself. Tell me what to do, I said, stepping closer to the energy column. I can feel power eyed me that I don't fully understand yet. Maybe it's enough. Perhaps, she conceded. The fact that you can exist here at all, that you can withstand the pressure of the abyss without protection, Augusts, you have indeed become something new. Something with potential. She unfurled slightly within her prison, revealing more of her serpentine form. Very well. Begin by placing your hand against the column. I approached cautiously, extending my right hand toward the pulsing blue energy. As my fingers touched the surface, it felt neither solid nor liquid but something in between, resisting then yielding to my touch. Cold so intense it burned shot up my arm, and I gasped but forced myself to keep my hand in place. Good. Tiamat's voice had taken on a more focused quality. Now, look beyond what you see with your physical eyes. The seals exist in multiple layers of reality simultaneously. You must perceive them before you can affect them. I tried to understand what she meant, closing my eyes to concentrate. The cold continued to spread up my arm, across my shoulder, seeping toward my heart. With it came awareness, of energies flowing around me, of patterns within patterns, mathematical principles expressed as pure power. When I opened my eyes again, I saw them, glowing sigils floating in concentric rings around the column, each one pulsing with its own rhythm, together creating a symphony of containment that had held for millennia. Some shone with golden light, others silver, still others the deep purple of bruised flesh, angels, devils, and fallen angels, all contributing to this prison. I see them, I whispered. Good. The seals are connected. Break one, and the others will respond, attempting to compensate. You must disrupt them simultaneously, or the backlash could destroy us both. How do I began, but then something within me answered the question before I could finish asking it. My left hand rose of its own accord, the skin splitting painlessly as red scales emerged, forming a gauntlet unlike any version of the boosted gear I had manifested before. This was sleeker, the scales finer, the green gems replaced with stones of deep crimson that seemed to hold galaxies within them. Power radiated from it, but not the familiar power of boost that I had relied on in battles past. This was something older, more primal, the raw creative destructive foe. RCE from which dragons had first emerged. Abyssal breaker, a voice that was both Dedrag's and not whispered in my mind. Understanding flooded through me, not knowledge exactly, but instinct, like remembering how to swim after years away from water. My transformed left hand began tracing complex patterns in the air, leaving trails of crimson energy that mirrored the seals but inverted them, creating anti-patterns that would neutralize their effect. Yes, Tiamat hissed, excitement evident in her voice. You understand better than you should. The power of the abyss flows through you naturally. I worked instinctively. My consciousness expanded to track dozens of interlinked magical formulas simultaneously. Sweat beaded on my forehead from the effort, but I continued, feeling each counter seal lock into place. Waiting for the moment when all would be ready. The final seal requires blood freely given, Tiamat instructed. A sacrifice to show intent. Without hesitation, I drew one clawed finger across my right palm. letting crimson droplets fall against the energy column. The blood didn't splatter but seemed to be absorbed, spreading through the blue energy in fractal patterns. Now, Tiamat commanded, activate all the counter seals at once. I clenched my scaled fist, and the crimson energy patterns flared blindingly bright. For one eternal moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like reality itself tearing, the column of energy shattered. The backlash threw me across the chamber, my back slamming into one of the stone columns. I slid to the floor, dazed, as pow! Whipped around the room in chaotic bursts. Through blurred vision, I watched as Tiamat unfurled to her full size, stretching wings that had been bound for centuries, her sapphire scales gleaming in the energy discharge. She was magnificent and terrifying, a perfect predator, a force of nature given form and consciousness. As she turned toward me, I had a moment of doubt. Had I made a catastrophic mistake? Would she simply destroy me now that she was free? Instead, she lowered her massive head until her eyes were level with mine. You have done what no being has attempted in 3,000 years, she said. Her actual voice even more impressive than her mental projection had been. Deep, resonant, with harmonics that seemed to vibrate the air itself. I am in your debt, young Dragon Emperor. I tried to stand but found my legs unwilling to cooperate. The energy expenditure had left me drained in a way I had never experienced before, not just physically tired but depleted at some fundamental level. The abyss is becoming unstable, Tiamat observed, looking around as the temple itself began to shudder. My imprisonment was woven into the fabric of this level. With those bindings gone, this entire pocket realm may collapse. That sounds bad, I managed, finally forcing myself to my feet. Indeed, we must leave immediately. She lowered herself to the ground beside me. Climb onto my back, I will carry you. I hesitated for only a second before complying, pulling myself onto her scaled back, finding handholds among the ridge-like protrusions along her spine. Her scales were cool to the touch but not uncomfortable, and I could feel power thrumming through her massive form. Hold tight, she warned, then launched herself toward the temple entrance with shocking speed for a being of her size. We burst from the temple just as it began to fold in on itself, stone grinding against stone as the impossible architecture collapsed. All around us, the black plain was fracturing, chasms opening to reveal nothing but absolute void beneath. How do we get out of here? I shouted over the cacophony of destruction. We ascend, Tiamat replied, her wings beating powerfully as she drove us upward toward the distant points of light. The abyss has layers, like your human conception of hell. We must pass through each to reach the surface world. As we rose, the environment around us changed. The black plain disappeared entirely, replaced by a swirling maelstrom of energy in every conceivable color. Shapes formed and dissolved in the chaos, buildings, landscapes, creatures, as if reality itself was trying different configurations and discarding them just as quickly. What is this place? I asked, clinging tighter as Tiamat navigated through the turbulence. The second layer, she called back. The realm of potentialities. All things that might exist but don't quite manage to manifest in higher realms remain here, endlessly becoming and unbecoming. We ed through a formation like a cloud made of crystal, and suddenly we were surrounded by what appeared to be a vast underwater landscape, coral structures the size of mountains, creatures of impossible biology drifting through currents of something thicker than water. The third layer, Tiamat explained without my needing to ask. The primordial sea, first home of Dragonkind, before we learn to walk on land or soar through air. Our ascent continued, each layer of the abyss revealing new wonders and terrors. A realm where gravity pulled in multiple directions simultaneously. A forest of cries, towering trees that sang in harmonic frequencies as we passed. A vast empty plain where our thoughts manifested as visible apparitions around us. With each transition, I felt the pressure of the abyss lessening. My consciousness becoming more focused, more individual again, though the expanded awareness I had gained remained. The memories and instincts I had accessed in the depths settled into my mind. No longer overwhelming but integrated, becoming parts of a new whole. Finally, after what might have been hours or days, time seemed fluid in the abyss, we reached what Tiamat called the first layer. The threshold between the abyss and the material world. Here, the environment appeared almost normal. a twilight landscape of rolling hills and distant mountains, though the sky above held no sun or moon, only a diffuse purple light. Tiamat landed on a hilltop, allowing me to slide from her back onto solid ground. I stood shakily, my body feeling simultaneously heavier and more fragile than it had in the depths. "We are almost home," Tiamat said, her voice gentler than before. "But before we cross the final threshold, we must speak of what comes after." I nodded, understanding the seriousness of our situation. The three factions will know what's happened. They'll come after us. Yes, my release will be felt by those sensitive to such disturbances. And your transformation. She studied me with those ancient eyes. You are no longer merely the Red Dragon Emperor as they understood that role. You have become something unprecedented, a being with one foot in the human realm and one in the abyss. Carrying the power of a Dragon Emperor but unbound by the traditional limitations of the sacred gear. What does that make me, exactly? I asked, looking down at my hands, which AP. Paired human again, though I could still feel the scales beneath the surface, waiting. A Supreme Dragon Emperor, Tiamat replied. One who draws power directly from the source rather than through the filtered mechanisms created by the biblical god. In some ways, you are what Dedrag and Albion were always meant to be, before their powers were sealed and diminished. And that's why they'll hunt us. They will try. Her massive head lowered until we were eye to eye. The question is, what will you do about it, Issei Hyodo? Will you hide? Will you surrender yourself to their judgment? Or will you claim the role that fate has thrust upon you? It was a question that would have paralyzed the old Issei with indecision and self-doubt. But something had fundamentally changed within me. The expansive consciousness I had gained in the abyss allowed me to see possibilities branching outward from this moment, paths that led to destruction, to subjugation, to freedom, to power beyond imagining. I won't hide, I said firmly. But I won't seek conflict either, at least not yet. First, I need to understand what I've become, to master these new abilities. I need allies. I looked at her pointedly. Starting with you, if you're willing. Tiamat made a sound that might have been a draconic chuckle. Bold of you to assume I would align myself with the vessel of my old enemy. Not his vessel anymore, I reminded her. Something new. Something with the potential to change how dragons exist in the world. Isn't that what you wanted, all those millennia ago? A new path for Dragonkind. She regarded me silently for a long moment. You are either very wise or very foolish to appeal to those ancient ambitions, she said finally. But you are correct. What you represent intrigues me. And I find myself curious to see the world that has continued without me. How it has changed. What opportunities it might present. Is that a yes? It is a provisional alliance, she clarified. I will accompany you back to the human realm. I will aid you in understanding your new nature. In return, you will help me acclimate to this new age and its politics. Beyond that, we shall see. It was better than I had hoped for. Agreed. So how do we cross back to the human world? That part is simple enough, Tiamat said, rising to her full height again. The first layer is thin, permeable to those with the right abilities. Your new connection to the abyss gives you the power to tear the veil between realms. She nodded toward my left arm. Use the abyssal breaker. Imagine a door open in G between here and a place you know well in the human world. Your will and power will do the rest. I lifted my left arm, calling forth the transformation again. The scales emerged smoothly this time, the crimson gems glowing with inner light. Following Tiamat's instruction, I focused on a location I knew intimately, the clearing in the forest outside Kuo town where I often went to practice with my sacred gear, away from prying eyes. The air before me shimmered, then split open like a wound in reality, revealing the familiar trees and undergrowth of the forest clearing, bathed in early morning sunlight. The sight of it, so normal, so real, brought a lump to my throat. Despite all that had changed, home still existed. Impressive for your first attempt, Tiamat observed. The passage appears stable. She was right. The portal wasn't fluctuating or showing signs of collapse. Somehow, I had created a perfect bridge between realms on my first try, an accomplishment that would have been impossible for me just days ago. Before we go through, I said, turning to face her, you might want to consider a less conspicuous form. A dragon your size will attract attention immediately. A reasonable suggestion. Her massive form began to glow with blue light, contracting and reshaping itself. The light grew so intense I had to shield my eyes. When I looked again, where the massive drive Agon had stood was now a woman of striking beauty, tall and elegant, with long hair the exact shade of her scales, cascading down her back in waves. Her eyes remained the same brilliant sapphire, and her features carried an unmistakable regality. She wore what appeared to be a formal business suit of deep blue, immaculately tailored to her form. "Will this suffice?" she asked, her human voice still, carrying echoes of her true nature's power and depth. I blinked in surprise. Yes, that's perfect, actually. I hadn't expected her human form to be so completely convincing or so effortlessly elegant. "How did you know to dress like that? You've been imprisoned for centuries." "I may have been bound, but not blind," she replied with a hint of amusement. "The abyss touches all realms. Through it, I've glimpsed fragments of the changing world, not enough to truly understand your modern era, but sufficient to observe its surface appearances." She straightened the cuffs of her jacket with a gesture that seemed both human and somehow ancient. "Shall we proceed?" I nodded, turning toward the portal. "Welcome back to the human world, Tiamat." Together, we stepped through the tear in reality. The transition was jarring. The air suddenly filled with scents of pine and morning dew, birds calling in the distance, the tactile sensation of actual wind against my skin. My body felt heavier, more solid. The expanded consciousness I had developed in the abyss partially contracting to fit within the constraints of normal reality. Tiamat took a deep breath beside me, her eyes closing momentarily as she absorbed the sensations. "The air is different," she murmured. "Thinner, tainted with strange chemicals." Her eyes opened, scanning our surroundings. "But the sunlight, I had almost forgotten how it feels on skin." The portal closed behind us with a sound like a sigh, leaving no trace of its existence. I took a moment to examine myself, relieved to find I appeared entirely human on the surface. The scales had receded beneath my skin, and the abyssal breaker was no longer visible on my arm. To casual observation, I was just Issei Hyodo, high school student. But I could feel he difference within, power coiled like a sleeping dragon, waiting to be called upon. Knowledge that no human should possess nestled alongside my memories of math tests and anime marathons. I was two things at once now, existing in a state of permanent liminality. "How long were we in the abyss?" I asked, noting the position of the sun. "Early morning, judging by the angle of light through the trees." Tiamat frowned slightly. "Time flows differently there. It's difficult to say with precision, but..." She closed her eyes, seeming to sense something. "Based on the movements of celestial bodies and the current of natural energies. Approximately 3 weeks have passed in this realm since your disappearance." 3 weeks. The implications hit me like a physical blow. My parents, my friends, Rias and her peerage, they would have been searching for me, perhaps believing me dead after the failed ritual. "We should establish our immediate situation before making contact with your former associates," Tiamat advised. Reading my expression correctly, the factions that attempted to seal away Didrake permanently will not simply abandon their objective because the method failed. They will be searching for you. And now for me as well. She was right, of course. Rational planning needed to take precedence over emotional reactions. The Issei who had entered that ritual circle would have rushed home immediately, heedless of consequences. The being who had returned was more careful, more strategic. "We need information," I said, "about what happened after the ritual, how the factions have reacted, what they might be planning next. And we need resources," Tiamat added. "I may appear human, but I have no identification, no currency, no established place in your modern society." I considered our options. "I have some emergency cash hidden in my room at home. We could go there first, but it's risky, they might be watching the house." "Indeed. Your devil associates, at minimum, will have placed observation spells around locations you frequent." Tiamat's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "What we need is a neutral party. Someone with connections to the supernatural world but not directly aligned with the major factions." A possibility occurred to me. I might know someone, an old man who runs an antique shop in town. He's always seemed to know more than he should about sacred gears and supernatural matters. But he's never declared allegiance to any faction that I know of. A promising start, Tiamat nodded. Lead the way, young emperor. We made our way through the forest toward town, keeping to less traveled paths. As we walked, I found myself studying Tiamat surreptitiously. In human form, she moved with effortless grace, her posture perfect, every gesture precise. Yet there was something slightly off about her interactions with the environment, the way she would pause to examine an ordinary butterfly with intense focus, or how she sometimes forgot to blink for unnaturally long periods. You're staring, she observed without looking my way. Sorry, I said, embarrassed at being caught. It's just strange to think about who you really are, what you've seen. You existed before human civilization began. Does that make you uncomfortable? She asked, finally turning those sapphire eyes toward me. To walk beside something so ancient in a borrowed human shape, I considered the question seriously. Not uncomfortable exactly, more aware of how little I know. How much history has been forgotten or rewritten. A wise perspective, she said approvingly. Most humans, and indeed, most younger supernatural beings, assume that what they know of history is complete and accurate. They never question the narratives they've been taught. We had reached the edge of the forest now, the outskirts of Kuo town visible ahead. The morning was still early enough that few people were about, which suited our purposes perfectly. Before we enter more populated areas, Tiamat said, stopping at the tree line, we should establish a plausible cover story for my presence. Who am I to you, should we be questioned? It was a practical concern I hadn't considered. A relative, maybe, a cousin from overseas. She shook her head. Too easily disproven, and my manner of speech and behavior will not convincingly match that of a modern young human. A teacher, then, I suggested. A university professor specializing in linguistics or ancient cultures. That would explain any oddities in how you speak or what you know. Tiamat considered this, then nodded. Acceptable. It allows for my apparent age and demeanor, and explains why I might be in your company, perhaps researching local historical sites or artifacts with you as a local guide. Dr. Tiamat, I began, then paused. You'll need a human surname. Abyss, she said immediately. Tiamat Abyss. Humans often choose names with personal significance, do they not? And few would recognize the double meaning. I couldn't help but smile at her choice, hiding in plain sight with a name that was both completely truthful and would sound to human ears like merely an unusual foreign surname. Dr. Tiamat Abyss it is, I agreed. Visiting professor of comparative linguistics, specializing in ancient and extinct languages. A field in which I am genuinely expert, she noted with the first hint of humor I'd seen from her. I spoke the first language ever created, after all. With our cover story established, we made our way into town. Kuo on a weekday morning was beginning to stir, shopkeepers raising their shutters. Students in uniform making their way to school, office workers hurrying to early meetings. The normality of it all struck me with unexpected force after the alien landscapes of the abyss. This had been my whole world once, and now it seemed so small, so limited. As we walked, I noticed Tiamat observing everything with intense curiosity, automatic doors sliding open, cars passing by. People talking on mobile phones. To her credit, she maintained her composure, but I could see the thousands of questions forming behind those ancient eyes. The technology of your age is more advanced than I anticipated, she murmured as we waited at a crosswalk. These horseless carriages, these glowing devices everyone carries, fascinating. I'll catch you up on everything, I promised. But first, let's find the old man's shop. We wound our way through increasingly narrow streets until we reached a section of town that seemed frozen in time, traditional wooden bewheel dings housing small specialty shops that had probably been in the same families for generations. At the end of one such street stood the antique shop I remembered, a modest storefront with a faded sign. Reading, Treasures of Ages, in both Japanese and English. This is it, I said, pausing outside. I'm not certain he'll be able to help us, but he's our best shot right now. Tiamat studied the building, her head tilting slightly. There are protective wards around this establishment, she observed. Subtle but quite effective. Your instincts were correct. This is no ordinary human's shop. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the door, a small bell announcing our entrance. The interior was dimly lit and cluttered with objects from every conceivable era, ancient Japanese pottery beside Victorian music boxes. Edo period scrolls next to Art Deco jewelry. The air smelled of sandalwood incense and old paper. Coming, called a voice from the back room. After a moment, a stooped figure emerged through a beaded curtain, an elderly Japanese man with thinning white hair and thick glasses, dressed in a simple gray yukata. He squinted at us, then his eyes widened in recognition. "Issei Hyodo," he said, his voice betraying surprise. "You've returned. And changed, I see." His gaze shifted to Tiamat, and if possible, his eyes widened even further. And in most unexpected company. That he could recognize Tiamat's true nature at a glance confirmed my suspicions about him. "We need help," I said simply. "And information." The old man studied us for a long moment, then sighed deeply. "You have no idea what you've set in motion, young man." He gestured toward the back room. "Come. This is not a conversation for open doors." As we followed him through the beaded curtain, I caught Tiamat's eye. She gave me a slight nod, approving of this first step. Whatever awaited us in the coming days, faction conflicts, personal vendettas, the exploration of my new powers, at least we had found a starting point. The old man closed the curtain behind us and activated what appeared to be additional privacy wards with a gesture. "Now then," he said, settling onto a cushion and indicating we should do the same. "Tell me exactly what happened during that ritual. And afterward, I shall tell you what has occurred in your absence." His weathered face grew serious. "Including who has been searching for you. And what they intend to do when they find you." As I began to recount our journey through the abyss, I felt the weight of something momentous settling around us, the sense that history itself was shifting direction. Old balances dissolving, new possibilities emerging. I had entered the ritual circle as a sacred gear wielder, a pawn in larger games. I had returned as something else entirely. I had returned as the Supreme Dragon Emperor of the Abyss. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, Kyoto's Golden Guardian. Autumn leaves danced on the wind across the temple courtyard, their sea crimson and gold hues catching morning sunlight. One particular maple leaf, perfectly formed and vibrant red, spiraled through the air before landing directly in the center of Issei's outstretched palm. He hadn't moved to catch it. The leaf had responded to his will, altering its path through otherwise random air currents. "Better," Tiamat observed from where she sat on the temple steps. 1 week had passed since their confrontation with Kuroka and subsequent alliance formation. In that time, Issei's training had progressed from crude manifestations of abyssal energy to increasingly subtle manipulations. Your precision improves. Micro-adjustments require more finesse than brute force applications. Issei examined the leaf resting on his palm, its edges perfectly preserved despite the late season. "It feels different," he explained, watching how the leaf's color deepened slightly under his gaze. "Less like commanding and more like suggesting. As if reality itself is willing to accommodate minor requests." From a nearby tree branch where she had been lounging in half-feline form, Kuroka snorted. "Are we still practicing kindergarten tricks? Some of us were hoping to see the elliptic dragon emperor actually do something impressive today." Her mockery lacked genuine bite. Over the past week, the Nekosho had settled into her role as reluctant ally with surprising ease. Her caustic commentary had become familiar background noise to their daily training sessions. Refinement before raw power, Tiamat responded without looking in Kuroka's direction. "A lesson many beings with significant destructive capacity never properly learn," says the dragon who reshaped coastlines during temper tantrums, Kuroka countered, stretching languidly before dropping to the ground in a perfect cat-like landing. "Precisely my point." Tiamat finally turned to regard the Nekosho with cool assessment. "Experience is an effective teacher, if somewhat wasteful of resources. Continents, for instance." Issei had grown accustomed to these exchanges, the ancient dragon and the Yukai assassin communicating through carefully calibrated barbs that masked growing mutual respect. Their dynamic added an interesting dimension to what could otherwise have been solitary training. "While you two compare notes on geological rearrangement," he interjected, rising smoothly to his feet, "I'm detecting something unusual approaching our perimeter." Both women immediately shifted attention outward, their supernatural senses extending beyond human limitations. Kuroka's eyes narrowed, pupils contracting to vertical slits as she processed sensory information. Yukai. She identified first. Fox spirit. Approaching deliberately, not attempting concealment. Agreed. Tiamat confirmed. High-level entity. Nine-tailed, if I'm not mistaken. And carrying correspondence. Issei nodded, his own perception having evolved significantly through Tiamat's tutelage. The approaching Yukai car, i.e. a distinct magical signature, powerful but carefully contained, projecting peaceful intent while maintaining defensive capabilities. More interestingly, they carried an object that radiated formal diplomatic energy. An official messenger, he concluded. Let's receive them properly. The trio moved to the temple entrance, positioning themselves in what had become their standard diplomatic configuration. Issei centered and slightly forward, Tiamat to his right in her human form dressed in elegant traditional attire, Kuroka to his left projecting casual disinterest while maintaining combat readiness. Minutes later, a figure appeared at the base of the stone steps leading to the temple grounds. The messenger was a beautiful woman with golden-orange hair and matching fox ears, dressed in an elaborate kimono of white and red. Behind her, 9 magnificent tails swayed gently, each tipped with white as if dipped in snow. She carried a lacquered box bound with ceremonial cords. Greetings, Supreme Dragon Emperor. The fox woman called, bowing formally. I am Momiji, emissary of Lady Yusaka, leader of the Kyoto Yukai faction. I bring formal correspondence and request audience. Issei nodded acknowledgement. Approach, emissary Momiji. You are welcome under diplomatic protection. The formality felt strange on his tongue but necessary. Over the past weeks, he had learned that supernatural politics operated through elaborate protocols that served both ceremonial and practical purposes. Proper recognition of an official messenger ensured specific magical protections activated, preventing misunderstandings that could escalate to violence. Momiji ascended the stairs with perfect poise, her tails maintaining balanced formation behind her. Upon reaching the temple entrance, she knelt gracefully, presenting the lacquered box with both hands. Lady Yusaka extends her respect to the newly emerged emperor and requests your consideration of matters affecting multiple realms, she stated. Eyes downcast in traditional deference. Issei accepted the box with appropriate ceremony. Please convey my appreciation to Lady Yusaka for this communication. Would you honor us by sharing tea while I review her message? The invitation represented both courtesy and strategic pause, allowing time to examine the communication for potential magical traps while maintaining diplomatic nicety. Momiji accepted with another bow, following Tiamat into the temple while Issei and Kuroka exchanged glances. Nine-tailed messenger for personal delivery, Kuroka murmured, eyebrows raised. Kyoto's taking you very seriously. Yusaka doesn't deploy personal attendants of this rank for minor matters. Let's see what warrants such attention, Issei replied, examining the box. The container itself was a masterpiece of Yukai craftsmanship, wood harvested during specific lunar phases, lacquer infused with protective fox fire, binding cords woven from spiritually significant materials. No traps or compulsions registered to his enhanced senses, only authentication and privacy enchantments. Inside rested a scroll sealed with golden wax impressed with the 9-tailed fox crest. The paper radiated subtle energy, alive in some fundamental way rather than mere material. Issei unrolled it carefully, finding elegant calligraphy written in ink that shifted colors as he read. To the Supreme Dragon Emperor of the Abyss. Greetings. Recent disturbances within the spiritual foundation of Kyoto have created unprecedented instability across multiple supernatural domains. Ancient barriers weakening, ley lines fluctuating, and guardian spirits reporting temporal anomalies suggest intervention from entities with significant dimensional manipulation capabilities. Asterisk. While the Kyoto Yukai faction maintains neutrality in broader factional conflicts, these disturbances threaten not only our territory but potentially the metaphysical stability of Eastern supernatural realms generally. Our investigations indicate possible connection to the convergence phenomenon referenced in multiple prophetic traditions. Asterisk. As these matters may relate directly to your emergence and represent mutual concern, I formally request your presence in Kyoto for consultation and potential cooperative response. Full diplomatic protections and appropriate accommodations will be extended to you and your companions. Asterisk. With respect and urgency, Yusaka, Guardian of Kyoto. leader of the Eastern Yukai Alliance. Issei rolled the scroll closed thoughtfully. The mention of convergence confirmed his suspici. On that knowledge of this phenomenon extended beyond the three factions. More immediately concerning were the reported disturbances. If something was destabilizing supernatural foundations in a place as spiritually significant as Kyoto, the implications could be far-reaching. He rejoined the others in the temple's reception area, where Tiamat was conducting a flawlessly formal tea ceremony for their Vulpine guest. The ancient dragon had adapted to modern human customs with remarkable speed, assimilating centuries of cultural evolution in mere weeks. Lady Yasaka's message concerns potentially serious metaphysical disturbances in Kyoto, Issei summarized after appropriate pleasantries had been observed. She requests our presence for consultation. Momiji nodded solemnly. The situation worsens daily. Sacred sites that have maintained stable energy patterns for centuries now fluctuate unpredictably. Some of our younger kitsune have reported time flowing at different rates within certain shrine boundaries. Temporal distortion suggests significant interdimensional interference, Tiamat observed, setting down her tea bowl with precision. Beyond standard Yukai capacity to address. Lady Yasaka recognized the limitations of our traditional approaches, Momiji acknowledged. The emergence of the Supreme Dragon Emperor coinciding with these disturbances seemed potentially connected. The implication hung in the air. Was Issei's transformation causing these problems, or was he being solicited to help solve them? Perhaps both simultaneously. What guarantees of security does your lady offer? Kuroka asked bluntly. The Emperor's emergence has generated considerable factional interest, not all of it friendly. Momiji turned to the Nekosho, assessing her with newfound interest. You would be Kuroka, last adult Nekosho. Your reputation precedes you. Before Kuroka could respond defensively, she continued, Lady Yasaka specifically mentioned you would be welcome under full protection. The Yukai Alliance never recognized the legitimacy of the devil judgment against your kind. This unexpected acknowledgement visibly surprised Kuroka, her customary cynicism momentarily displaced by genuine emotion. The extermination of Nekosho had been sanctioned primarily by devil authorities, with other factions offering little resistance to what amounted to supernatural genocide. Yasaka's faction taking a contrary position, even belatedly, carried significant meaning. As for security, Momiji continued, Kyoto remains sovereign Yukai territory. The three factions maintain embassies but no direct authority. Lady Yasaka offers formal guest right under ancient protocols. Any aggression against you within our territory would constitute direct action against the Yukai Alliance itself. Issei exchanged glances with his companions. Tiamat gave a subtle nod of approval. The offered protections aligned with proper supernatural diplomatic standards. Kuroka's express. Sion remained guarded but no longer overtly suspicious. Please inform Lady Yasaka we accept her invitation and will depart tomorrow at dawn, Issei decided. We appreciate both the courtesy of Perso Null Messenger and the formal protections offered. Momiji bowed deeply. Lady Yasaka will be pleased. I am instructed to guide you personally to ensure safe passage through established transportation channels. After finalizing arrangements and seeing the messenger off, the trio convened to discuss implications. Kuroka paced restlessly while Tiamat studied a map of Japan's spiritual topography she had recently acquired. Kyoto's ley line nexus is among the most significant in Eastern Asia, the dragon observed, tracing interconnected energy paths with one elegant finger. Disruption there old potentially affect supernatural stability across multiple countries. More importantly, Kuroka added, it's neutral territory where multiple factions maintain presence without direct control. Perfect meeting ground for diplomatic maneuvering. Issei nodded, considering both tactical and strategic implications. This invitation represents our first formal recognition from a major supernatural faction that isn't actively hostile. Yasaka's approach suggests she sees potential alliance value rather than inherent threat. Don't be naive, Kuroka cautioned. Yukai are master opportunists. They're reaching out because they need something specific. The moment your utility ends, so might their hospitality. Perhaps, Tiamat acknowledged. But necessity often births lasting alliances when mutual benefit becomes apparent. The Yukai faction has maintained independence precisely by recognizing advantageous partnerships without surrendering autonomy. Issei absorbed these perspectives while formulating his own assessment. Politics aside, Genuine metaphysical disturbances warranted investigation. If these anomalies connected to the still mysterious convergence, understanding them directly served his interests. We accept the invitation on its stated terms, he decided, while maintaining appropriate caution. Yusaka gains potential assistance with her immediate problem, we gain information about convergence manifestations and establish diplomatic relations with a neutral major faction. And if it's a trap? Kuroka asked, devil's advocate role coming naturally. Then we'll deal with it accordingly. Issei replied with quiet confidence that would have been impossible for his former self. But alienating a potential ally by assuming hostile intent serves no purpose. Decision made. They turned to practical preparations. Tiamat compiled relevant historical and magical information about Kyoto's supernatural significance. Kuroka activated her intelligence network, King background on current Yukai political dynamics. Issei focused on personal preparation, meditation techniques that would help maintain his increasingly powerful abilities within the spiritually charged environment of Japan's ancient capital. As evening approached, Issei found himself on the temple roof, watching sunset paint the sky in crimson and gold hues that reminded him of dragon fire. His thoughts drifted to how dramatically his existence had transformed in mere weeks, from high school student with conventional ambitions to emerging cosmic entity navigating supernatural politics. Contemplating existential matters, Tiamat's voice carried from behind him. She moved with preternatural grace across the roof tiles to sit beside him, her human form silhouetted against the dying light. Just thinking about scale, he replied honestly. A month ago, my biggest concern was passing exams. Now I'm preparing for diplomatic negotiations with Yukai leadership about metaphysical stability across multiple dimensions. Tiamat's expression softened marginally, a small thing for most, but significant from the typically reserved dragon. Perspective shifts can be disorienting even for beings with centuries to adjust. You've adapted remarkably well to cosmic awareness compressed into weeks. Not entirely by choice, he noted wryly. Adaptation has been necessity rather than virtue. Nevertheless, she insisted, many would have broken under the pressure or surrendered to power's more destructive temptations. Your core identity remains essentially intact despite fundamental transformation. That represents strength of character worth acknowledging. This rare direct praise from his draconic mentor carried weight. Tiamat offered criticism freely but dispensed approval with miserly reluctance. Her recognition that he was navigating his transformation effectively meant more than she likely realized. I couldn't have managed without guidance, he admitted. Your knowledge has been invaluable, even when delivered with glacial condescension. A sound suspiciously like stifled laughter escaped the Dragon Queen. Teaching has never been my primary skill. Dragons typical. Why learn through direct experience rather than instruction? Your hybrid nature requires adaptations to traditional approaches. Speaking of hybrid nature, Issei segued, addressing something that had been concerning him. How will Kyoto's spiritual environment affect my transformation? From what you've explained about ley lines and power nexuses. A legitimate concern, Tiamat nodded. Kyoto represents one of the most magically concentrated locations in the human realm. Its spiritual foundations predate recorded history, with layers of power accumulated through millennia of continuous habitation and ritual observance. She considered the technical aspects before continuing. Your connection to the abyss will likely respond to these energies, not negatively, but potentially with accelerated development in unexpected directions. Meaning aspects of your abilities that have remained dormant might activate in response to Kyoto's particular metaphysical properties. See how certain chemicals catalyze specific reactions while leaving others unaffected. She studied him with analytical precision. We should establish additional mental discipline protocols before departing. Kyoto is no place for uncontrolled power manifestations. They spent the remaining evening hours in focused preparation, Tiamat guiding Issei through advanced meditation techniques to maintain coherent identity amid overwhelming spiritual energies. These exercises differed from previous training, focusing less on power manipulation and more on maintaining stable consciousness. When exposed to multiple metaphysical influences simultaneously. Meanwhile, Kuroka prepared in her own way, checking equipment, refreshing protective talismans, and conducting divination rituals that combined Nekosho traditional practices with techniques borrowed from multiple magical traditions. Her approach to survival had always emphasized adaptability over purism. By dawn, all three were paired according to their respective methods. They assembled at the temple entrance as first light crested the eastern horizon. No words were necessary as Issei activated the boundary protocols that would protect their territory during their absence, layers of abyssal energy woven into conceptual patterns that would discourage both casual trespassers and dedicated intruders. Momiji arrived precisely as arranged. Now dressed in more practical attire suitable for travel. The transportation circle is prepared, she informed them after appropriate greetings. Lady Yusaka has authorized direct pass age to inner Kyoto rather than standard arrival platforms. This represented significant privilege. Direct transportation to Kyoto's protected center rather than outlying arrival zones indicated high-level diplomatic status. Issei acknowledged this courtesy with appropriate formality, maintaining the delicate balance of supernatural politics. Their journey began with a conventional transportation circle, standard magical infrastructure connecting major supernatural territories. But halfway through the transfer process, Momiji activated secondary arrays that diverted their passage through what felt like folded space. The sensation was distinctly different from standard magical transportation, smoother, more elegant, as if sliding between layers of reality rather than punching through them. They materialized within a traditional Japanese garden of breathtaking beauty. Ancient maple trees displayed peak autumn coloration, a small stream wandered between artfully arranged rocks, and the eye itself seemed to shimmer with benevolent spiritual energy. Surrounding the garden stood traditional wooden buildings of exquisite craftsmanship, their roofs curved gracefully against the morning sky. "Welcome to the heart of Kyoto," Momiji announced formally, the inner sanctum of the Yukai faction headquarters. Few outsiders are granted direct access to these grounds. Issei immediately understood why. The location existed simultaneously in multiple metaphysical states, partly in the human world, partly in Yukai's spiritual realm, with elements that touched other dimensions entirely. This arrangement allowed beings from different supernatural categories to interact without adjusting their fundamental nature. Impressive interdimensional architecture, Tiamat observed, professional appreciation evident in her tone. The boundary harmonization demonstrates exceptional skill. "Thank you," replied a new voice from behind them. The current configuration represents 15 centuries of continuous refinement. They turned to find a woman approaching along a stone path. At first glance, she appeared to be a striking human in her late 20s, dressed in an elaborate 12-layer kimono of gold and white. But as she drew closer, her true nature became apparent. Golden fox ears atop cascading blonde hair, 9 magnificent tails flowing behind her like living silk, and eyes of molten amber that held both ancient wisdom and vibrant energy. "Lady Yusaka," Momiji introduced with deep bow. "May I present Issei Hyodo, the Supreme Dragon Emperor of the Abyss, Tiamat, the Chaos Karma Dragon, and Kuroka of the Nekosho." Quote, "Welcome to Kyoto," Yusaka greeted them, her voice musical yet carrying undeniable authority. She bowed with perfect grace, depth precisely calibrated to acknowledge Issei's emerging status while maintaining her own sovereign dignity. "I appreciate your prompt response to my invitation." Issei returned the bow with equivalent precision, a skill Tiamat had drilled into him with exacting standards. "We appreciate both your hospitality and the seriousness with which you've approached these concerning developments." "Some matters transcend factional differences," Yusaka replied, gesturing for them to follow her toward a nearby pavilion. "The stability of Kyoto's spiritual foundation affects realms far beyond our immediate territory." The pavilion offered spectacular views across both physical Kyoto and its spiritual counterpart, an architectural achievement that allowed simultaneous perception of multiple dimensional layers. Attendants served tea and traditional confections as they settled around a low table of ancient hinoki cypress. "I'll speak directly," Yusaka began after observational pleasantries had been exchanged. 3 weeks ago, our monitoring systems detected the first anomalies, subtle fluctuations in ley line energy flow that initially appeared to be seasonal adjustments. Within days, these fluctuations intensified and developed patterns suggesting deliberate manipulation rather than natural variation. She activated a visualization sphere at the table's center, displaying 3-dimensional representation of Kyoto's spiritual topography. Glowing lines represented major and minor ley lines connecting sacred sites throughout the region. Several junctions pulsed with irregular rhythms, energy flows visibly disrupted. The pattern expanded geometrically, she continued, advancing the visualization through time. Currently, 28% of our spiritual infrastructure shows significant disruption. Effects include weakened barriers between realms, temporal inconsistencies within sacred precincts, and guardian spirits reporting energy depletion. Methodical harvest rather than random disruption, Tiamat observed, studying the patterns with ancient expertise. These fluctuations follow optimization algorithms, maximizing energy extraction while minimizing detection probability. Yusaka nodded, clearly, impressed by the dragon's immediate grasp of technical details. Our analysis reached similar conclusions. Someone is systematically siphoning power from our spiritual foundation, using techniques that bypass traditional wardcraft. The energy signature suggests dimensional manipulation, Issei noted, his connection to the abyss providing unique insight. Similar to how I access abyssal power, Ut inverted, pulling energy from this realm toward elsewhere rather than drawing external power inward. Exactly, Yusaka confirmed, her amber eyes studying him with new interest. Which partially explains my invitation. Your emergence coincided with these disruptions beginning, and your unique abilities may provide perspective our traditional approaches lack. Kuroka, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. Coincidental timing doesn't necessarily indicate causation. What evidence connects these disruptions specifically to convergence phenomena rather than opportunistic power theft? The directness of her question might have seemed impolitic, but Yusaka appeared to appreciate the straightforward approach. A valid distinction. 3 specific factors suggest convergence connection. Rather than conventional supernatural crime, she adjusted the visualization, highlighting specific anomaly patterns. First, the disruption signature contains harmonic frequencies documented in only one previous historical event, the Dragon King Conclave of 537 CE, when 5 Dragon Kings attempted simultaneous ascension rituals. The Ryugu catastrophe, Tiamat identified immediately, her expression darkening. An ill-conceived attempt to access primal draconic power through collective ritual. Indeed, Yusaka confirmed. Second, affected areas report manifestation of crystalline structure. With properties matching fragmentary descriptions of dragon tears, solidified dimensional residue from failed convergence attempts. She produced a small container, opening it to reveal what read to be a crystal shard approximately 3 centimeters long. The object defied simple description, its color shifting constantly through spectral variations while its shape seemed to occupy slightly more dimensions than physically possible. And third, she concluded, returning the disturbing artifact to its container, divination rituals specifically targeting convergence potentiality show UNP. Recedented activity levels focused on Kyoto generally and certain key sites specifically. Issei absorbed this information, mentally connecting it with what little they had learned about convergence through their own investigations. If someone was deliberately manipulating energies connected to this phenomenon, the implications extended far beyond local disruption. You believe someone is attempting to force convergence manifestation? He asked directly. Yusaka nodded gravely. Our working hypothesis, not merely extracting energy for conventional purposes, but deliberately destabilizing foundational structures to create conditions similar to those described in ancient prophecies regarding convergence emergence points. Recklessly dangerous approach, Tiamat stated flatly. Convergence cannot be artificially induced through mere energy manipulation. Historical attempts have universally produced catastrophic backlash, which likely explains the distributed extraction pattern, Yusaka agreed. Small disruptions across multiple sites rather than major intervention at single location, attempting to gradually reshape metaphysical conditions while avoiding threshold triggers for protective responses. The implications were disturbing on multiple levels. Beyond immediate threats to Kyoto's stability, this represented sophisticated understanding of convergence mechanics, knowledge that should be extremely restricted. More concerning, it suggested organized effort rather than individual experimentation. Have you identified any suspects? Kuroka asked, professional interest evident in her focused attention. This operation would require significant resources and specialized expertise. We have eliminated most obvious candidates, Yusaka replied. The 3 factions main Ain traditional presence here but show no unusual activity patterns. Rogue Yukai groups lack necessary technical capacity. Independent supernatural organizations with appropriate capabilities all appear to be observing rather than intervening directly, which suggests either extremely skilled concealment or involvement from unexpected quarters, Issei concluded. Perhaps entities believed Dorma, NT or factions not traditionally active in this region. Yusaka's expression confirmed his assessment. Our sentries reported brief dimensional signatures matching Nordic magical structures last week. Unusual given minimal historical Asgardian interest in Eastern supernatural affairs. This new information created additional complexity. Nordic supernatural entities operated under different fundamental principles than Eastern or biblical factions, with distinctive approaches to dimensional manipulation derived from Yggdrasil-based cosmology. We should investigate directly, Issei decided after brief consideration. Theoretical analysis has limitations without field observation of these anomalies. I hoped you would offer, Yusaka acknowledged with diplomatic grace. While we have considerable expertise regarding traditional spiritual matters, your unique perspective may perceive aspects our specialists miss. Particularly regarding potential abyssal connections. The discussion shifted to practical arrangements. Yusaka provided detailed information about affected sites, anomaly characteristics, and current containment measures. Her technical knowledge impressed even Tiamat. This was no figurehead leader but a ruler with comprehensive understanding of her domain's metaphysical infrastructure. As their initial consultation concluded, Yusaka personally escorted them to prepare accommodations within the inner sanctum. The guest quarters reflected traditional Japanese aesthetics elevated through supernatural craftsmanship, living wood that responded to occupants' comfort needs. Paper screens that provided both physical privacy and spiritual shielding, furnishings that adjusted subtly to individual preferences. Rest and acclimate to Kyoto's spiritual environment, Yusaka suggested as attendants finalized arrangements. The nearest affected site is Fushimi Inari Shrine, where we can begin investigations tomorrow morning before public visiting hours. As she turned to leave, a small figure darted from behind a decorative screen, a young girl perhaps 8 or 9 years old, with blonde hair and miniature fox ears and tail. She collided directly with Yusaka's legs, clinging to her elaborate robes with childish enthusiasm. "Mother, you promised to show me the koi pond transformation ritual today," the child exclaimed before noticing the visitors. Her eyes widened dramatically, gaze fixing on Issei with undisguised curiosity. "Is that him? The Dragon Emperor everyone's talking about? He doesn't look very dragony." "Kuno," Yusaka admonished gently, though a affection shone clearly through her attempt at parental dignity. "This is not how we greet honored guests." The girl immediately straightened, performing a formal bow with endearing seriousness. "Please excuse my improper entrance. I am Kuno, daughter of Yusaka and heir to Kyoto's leadership. Welcome to our home." Issei couldn't help but smile at the combination of ceremonial language and childish delivery. "Thank you for your welcome, Lady Kuno. I am Issei Hyodo." The girl studied him with unconcealed assessment. "If you're really a dragon emperor, can you breathe fire? Or fly? Or turn into a huge dragon like in the old scrolls?" "Kuno," Yusaka interrupted, apologetic embarrassment coloring her tone. "Our guests have traveled far and require rest, not interrogation about their abilities." "It's quite all right," Issei assured her, charmed by the child's directness after weeks of careful supernatural diplomacy. He knelt to Kuno's level. "I'm still learning about my abilities, actually. Being a dragon emperor is new to me." This admission clearly surprised the young kitsune. "How can you not know? Didn't you always have dragon powers?" "Not always," he explained, finding simple truth more appropriate than diplomatic evasion with a child. "Until recently, I was just an ordinary high school student. Things changed very suddenly." Kuno considered this with serious concentration. "Like how a caterpillar becomes a butterfly. Were you in a cocoon?" "Something like that," Issei agreed, appreciating the apt metaphor. "Except my cocoon was a place called the Abyss, deep beneath the normal world." The girl's eyes widened with appropriate awe. Before she could launch another barrage of questions, Yusaka placed gentle hands on her shoulders. "That's enough for now, little one. You'll have time for more questions later. Didn't you mention the koi pond ritual?" Successfully distracted, Kuno bounced excitedly. Yes, you promised to show me how to help the koi transition to their spirit forms for winter. With apologetic grace, Yusaka excused herself to fulfill parental obligations, promising to reconnect for dinner. As mother and daughter departed, Issei noticed something significant. Beneath Yusaka's composed leadership persona existed genuine maternal warmth. This humanizing element added complexity to his developing impression of Kyoto's leader. Once alone, the trio conducted standard security assessments of their accommodations, Tiamat examining magical protections, Kuroka checking for surveillance measures, Issei extending his abyssal senses to verify dimensional stability. Finding the quarters both secure and genuinely hospitable, they relaxed marginally. Yusaka impresses, Tiamat acknowledged, settling onto a cushion with characteristic grace. Few contemporary leaders maintain such balanced understanding of both political and metaphysical domains. And she's doing it while raising a daughter alone, Kuroka added unexpectedly. When the others looked at her with surprise, she shrugged defensively. What? I can acknowledge competent parenting. Rarity makes it noteworthy. The daughter complicates our assessment, Issei observed thoughtfully. Yusaka's responsibilities extend beyond political leadership to personal vulnerability through her child. That influences decision-making in ways we should consider. It also explains our proactive approach to these disturbances, Tiamat noted. Threats to Kyoto's stability represent direct danger to her offspring's future. Maternal protection instincts transcend species distinctions. This observation sparked conversation about how personal connections influenced supernatural politics generally, a dimension often overlooked in formal diplomatic analyses. Beings with millennia-long lifespans developed different relationship patterns than humans, but fundamental emotional attachments remained influential across species boundaries. Their discussion continued until early evening, when Momiji arrived to escort them to dinner. Rather than formal banquet in public dining halls, Yusaka had arranged private meal in her personal quarters, a significant gesture indicating genuine desire for substantive conversation rather than ceremonial interaction. The leader's residence balanced official function with personal comfort, formal reception spaces transitioning to private family areas with subtle architectural cues. They were shown to an intimate dining room overlooking illuminated gardens where fireflies danced among carefully pruned maple trees. Yusaka greeted them in simple-eyed attire, still elegant but without the 12-layer formality of official audiences. Kuno joined them briefly, peppering the visitors with enthusiastic questions before being gently directed to evening studies by her tutor. As traditional multi-course Keizeki meal progressed, conversation shifted naturally between practical matters and broader philosophical exploration. Yusaka proved to be not merely capable administrator but genuine intellectual, equally comfortable discussing historical precedents for current anomalies and theoretical implications of convergence manifestations. The three factions maintain rigidly structured view of supernatural taxonomy, she observed during discussion of traditional power classifications. Their theological frameworks require clear separation between categories, angels, devils, dragons, yokai, each with defined limitations and hierarchical position. Convenient for maintaining established power structures, Tiamat noted with ancient cynicism. Artificial distinctions prevent potential combinations that might challenge theological supremacy. Precisely, Yusaka agreed, yet historical evidence suggests much more fluid interactions between supernatural categories before biblical cosmology achieved dominance. Eastern traditions particularly recognized transitional forms and evolutionary potential across supposed boundaries. This perspective aligned with fragments Issei had gathered from his abyssal memories, glimpses of primal dragon civilizations that embodied principles later artificially separated into distinct supernatural categories. The convergence concept itself seemed to represent potential reunification of deliberately divided aspects. Which explains factional fear regarding my emergence, he concluded, connections forming. I represent living contradiction to their taxonomic certainties, neither properly human nor conventionally draconic, drawing power from sources outside their cosmological framework. More threatening than mere power differential, Yusaka confirmed. Your existence challenges foundational assumptions upon which current supernatural order rests. If categories prove permeable rather than fixed, their entire hierarchical structure requires reconsideration. The political implications extended far beyond personal safety concerns. If Issei's transformation represented broader potentia, L for supernatural evolution rather than isolated anomaly, established power centers would perceive existential threat regardless of his individual intentions. But then, why would anyone attempt to artificially trigger convergence manifestations? Kuroka questioned, returning discussion to immediate Kyoto situation. Destabilizing existing power structures serves no one currently benefiting from them. Unless the responsible parties believe they can control the outcome, Yusaka suggested. Historical attempts to manipulate convergence energies typically sought to channel manifestation Taoa. Road-specific predetermined forms rather than allowing natural emergence. Fundamentally flawed approach, Tiamat stated definitively. Convergence represents cosmic correction to artificial separatio. N. By definition beyond conventional control parameters. Historical attempts universally produced unintended consequences precisely because they sought to direct inherently self-determining process. Dinner concluded with agreement to begin direct investigation at dawn. Rather than speculating further without empirical observation, they would examine affected sites personally to assess patterns and potential intervention approaches. As they returned to their quarters, Issei found himself reflecting on Yusaka's insights. Her perspective on supernatural taxonomy provided contextual framework that helped explain factional reactions to his emergence. Beyond immediate threats, he represented uncomfortable reminder that current supernatural order rested on potentially arbitrary distinctions rather than immutable natural law. Morning arrived with gentle chimes rather than harsh alarms, attendants providing traditional breakfast before their scheduled departure. Kyoto in early morning crescent. Ted ethereal beauty. Mist curling between ancient structures, spiritual energies more visible during transitional hours between night and day. Yusaka joined them dressed for practical fieldwork rather than ceremonial appearance. Her 9 tails consolidated to appear as a single larger manifestation, a form better suited for potential energy manipulation. She led them personally toward Fushimi Inari, explaining that public transportation would be counterproductive given their need to access restricted areas. The shrine's public face remains fully functional, she explained as they traveled via specialized Yukai pathways that curved through dimensional shortcuts. Maintaining appearance of normalcy prevents human panic while we address underlying issues. Fortunately, most anomalies manifest beyond perceptual range of ordinary visitors. Fushimi Inari Taisha materialized before them, Japan's most important shrine to Inari, the kami of fertility, rice, and prosperity. Famous for its sands of vermilion torii gates creating tunnels along mountain paths, the shrine complex covered the entirety of Mount Inari. Morning light cast the brilliant orange-red structures in dramatic relief against forest greenery. The primary disturbance centers on the inner shrine, Yusaka explained, leading them past public areas toward restricted sanctums. Specifically, the junction point where Re major ley lines converge beneath the main offering hall. As they proceeded deeper into the complex, Issei felt Kyoto's spiritual environment affecting his senses as Tiamat had predicted. His perception expanded beyond normal parameters, layers of reality becoming simultaneously visible. The shrine existed in multiple states concurrently: physical structure in human world, energy configuration in spiritual realm, conceptual representation in higher dimensions. More concerning, he could perceive the anomalies Yusaka had described. Wrongness in the flowing patterns of natural energy, like a river suddenly diverted from its proper course. The disruption signature carried distinctive harmonic frequency that resonated uncomfortably with his abyssal connection. You can see it, Yusaka observed, noting his focused attention on specific junction points. Most beings require specialized equipment or enhancement spells to perceive these disturbances directly. My connection to the abyss provides different perceptual framework, Issei explained, studying the energy patterns with growing concern. These disruptions show intentional precision, surgical intervention rather than crude extraction. They reached the inner shrine, an ancient wooden structure housing sacred objects with spiritual lineage extending back millennia. Here, the disruption patterns intensified dramatically. What, from outside appeared as subtle energy fluctuation manifested within as visible distortion, reality itself seeming to ripple like fabric in gentle breeze. The anomalies intensified significantly overnight, Yusaka noted with evident concern. This degradation rate exceeds our projection models. Tiamat moved with focused purpose, her human form temporarily forgotten as she extended draconic senses through the distorted field. Multiple extraction vectors, she reported, ancient expertise evident in her immediate analysis. Primary siphon operates through dimensional folding rather than dire. Court channeling, extremely sophisticated methodology. Kuroka contributed her own specialized perception, Nekosho Senjutsu providing unique insight into natural energy manipulation. The extraction follows biological patterns rather than mechanical principles, she observed. Almost like feeding behavior rather than technological implementation. Their combined assessment painted disturbing picture. Whatever caused these disruptions operated through principles that blended technological precision with organic adaptability. Not merely stealing energy but establishing parasitic relationship with Kyoto's spiritual foundation. I need to examine the dimensional aspects more directly, Issei decided, his transformation responding to the environment's metaphysical properties as Tiamat had predicted. Scales emerged along his forearms as he extended awareness toward the distortion epicenter. His abyssal connection provided unique perspective, ability to perceive how reality folded between dimensions. Where conventional magical senses detected only effects rather than mechanism. What he discovered confirmed their worst suspicions. It's a purposely constructed instability, he explained, drawing from deep perception with careful control. Not merely extracting energy but deliberately creating dimensional fault line. If these disruptions continue along current progression, they'll establish permanent breach between realms. To what purpose? Yusaka questioned, professional calm masking evident concern. Permanent dimensional breaches typically produce catastrophic entropy cascade rather than controlled outcome. Unless the breach targets specific destination, Tiamat suggested, connecting implications. Traditional convergence prophecies reference, thinning of veils between realms as prerequisite condition. Understanding crystallized among them simultaneously. These disruptions represented sophisticated attempt to create controlled environment for convergence manifestation rather than merely exploiting existing instabilities. Someone was methodically preparing Kyoto to serve as emergence point for whatever they believed convergence would produce. We need to stabilize this junction immediately, Issei stated, shifting from analysis to action. The degradation pattern approaches critical threshold for self-sustaining reaction. Yusaka nodded sharply, Abondo. Ning diplomatic reserve for practical necessity. What resources do you require? Access to the primary shrine object, he replied without hesitation. The sacred mirror, specifically. Its position at ley line junction makes it ideal anchor point for stabilization countermeasures. This request clearly surprised Kyoto's leader. The shrine's central object represented among the most sacred artifacts in Japanese spiritual tradition. Normally accessible only to highest-ranking shrine maidens under specific ritual conditions. However, she recognized the urgency outweighed traditional restrictions. Granted, she stated simply, leading them toward innermost sanctuary. The heart of Fushimi Inari contained a simple wooden structure housing ancient bronze mirror of extraordinary metaphysical significance. Not merely symbolic representation but actual interface point between physical and spiritual realms. The mirror had accumulated layers of conceptual importance through centuries of ritual focus and spiritual investment. As Yusaka performed abbreviated but necessary purification rituals, Issei prepared his approach. This intervention required delicate balance, sufficient power to counteract ongoing disruption without introducing additional instability through crude application. I'll establish primary stabilization matrix, he explained to his companions. Tiamat, your expertise harmonic resonance patterns will be essential for dampening oscillation effects. Kuroka, your senjutsu can help redirect natural energy flows back toward their proper channels. The Nekosho raised skeptical eyebrow. Awfully confident in your ability to coordinate multi-species magical intervention, Dragon Boy. Not confidence, Tiamat corrected unexpectedly. Natural aptitude. His hybrid Atur provides intuitive understanding of how different magical traditions interact, rare quality even among beings with far greater longevity. This rare praise from the ancient dragon silenced further objection. As Yusaka completed necessary protocols and stepped aside, Issei approached the sacred mirror with appropriate reverence. The artifact radiated accumulated power from countless generatio. NS of spiritual investment. not merely magical but metaphysically significant in ways transcending conventional supernatural categories. Calling upon his abyssal connection, Issei extended perception beyond physical limitations. The mirror's true nature became apparent, not object but interface, junction point where conceptual and material aspects of reality maintained structured relationship. Through this junction, he could directly access the destabilized energy patterns affecting Kyoto's spiritual foundation. What followed demonstrated why emerging dragon emperors historically inspired both awe and terror. Rather than merely countering specific disruptions, Issei addressed underlying conceptual framework, reality itself responding to his directed will as he established new stability parameters that respected existing spiritual architecture while reinforcing weakened boundaries. Tiamat contributed her ancient expertise, millennia of draconic knowledge allowing precise harmonic adjustments that damped destructive resonance patterns without disrupting beneficial energy flows. Her work complemented Issei's broader stabilization efforts with surgical precision born of countless previous interventions across multiple realms. Meanwhile, Kuroka applied specialized nekosho techniques. Senjutsu masters historically served as natural energy regulators, their unique sensitivity alloying targeted adjustment of spiritual currents. Where artificial disruption had diverted energy flows, she gently redirected them toward proper channels, her normally chaotic nature focused with surprising discipline. Yasaka observed this coordinated intervention with undisguised fascination. Though powerful within her own domain, she recognized fundamentally different approach in their methodology. Not merely manipulating existing systems but engaging directly with reality's underlying structures. The implications extended beyond immediate crisis management to potential reconsideration of traditional Yukai metaphysical practices. After intensive effort that might have been minutes or hours, time perception distorted under extreme metaphysical conditions, Issei gradually withdrew from deep intervention state. The shrine's energy patterns showed significant improvement, not fully restored to natural configuration but stabilized sufficiently to prevent immediate catastrophic progression. The critical junction is secure, he reported, voice carrying lingering harmonic resonance from extended abyssal connection. Secondary manifestations should stabilize naturally once primary disruption stops propagating. Tiamat nodded confirmation. The harmonic patterns show self-organizing tendency toward baseline configuration. Given sufficient time without additional interference, natural metaphysical homeostasis should reassert. Which leaves critical question, Kuroka interjected pragmatically. Who created this disruption, how many other sites are affected, and when will they notice? Their handiwork has been partially undone. Valid questions that shifted their focus from immediate intervention to broader strategic concerns. This disruption pattern showed sophisticated understanding of both Kyoto's spiritual architecture and convergence dynamics, knowledge combination that should be extraordinarily rare even among advanced supernatural practitioners. We should examine other affected sites before formulating comprehensive response, Yasaka suggested, practical leadership reasserting after crisis stabilization. This represents most severe manifestation, but 18 added. Ional locations show similar disruption signatures at various development stages. The next several hours followed similar pattern across multiple sacred sites throughout Kyoto. Each location revealed variations on central theme, sophisticated energy extraction combined with deliberate weakening of dimensional boundaries. Some focused on ley line junctions, others targeted natural formation points, where spiritual and material realms historically maintained closer proximity. By mid-afternoon, they had examined 7 major sites and established provisional stabilization measures at each pattern. Recognition emerged from cumulative observation. The disruptions formed geometric configuration across Kyoto's spiritual topography, creating what appeared to be controlled fracture network rather than random exploitation. They're establishing preliminary framework for major dimensional event, Tiamat concluded as they paused for brief respite in secluded garden. Not merely weakening barriers, but creating specific geometric arrangement designed to channel resulting manifestation along predetermined pathways. Controlling where and how convergence energy would flow, Issei elaborated, connecting implications. If these disruptions had continued unaddressed, they would eventually create something like supervised birth canal for whatever they believe convergence will produce. The Vision and scope of this operation suggested resources and knowledge beyond conventional supernatural organizations. Even major factions typically lacked both technical expertise and practical capability to implement such sophisticated metaphysical engineering across multiple sites simultaneously. We should investigate potential source directly, Kuroka suggested with professional assassin's practicality. These operations require physical implementation points, places where actual spellcasters or devices establish initial disruption patterns before they become self-sustaining. Yusaka Kansi read this approach with evident concern. Direct confrontation carries significant escalation risk. If responsible entities possess capability for this level of metaphysical manipulation, their comba chi potential likely exceeds conventional parameters. True, Issei acknowledged, but continued passive response grants initiative advantage. Each stabilized location represents holding action rather than permanent solution. Without addressing root cause, we merely delay whatever outcome they intended. Their discussion of strategic options continued as they proceeded toward 8th affected loca. Chion, ancient cemetery where boundary between living and dead traditionally maintained permeable but stable configuration. Here, disruption patterns showed distinctive variation from previously examined sites. Different signature. Tiamat identified immediately, ancient senses detecting subtle variations invisible to conventional perception. Same overall objective but implemented through alternative methodology. Multiple operators with distinctive techniques rather than standardized approach. This observation carried significant implications, not individual actor but coordinated team with specialized expertise areas. The operation scope expanded beyond what even major factions typically fielded for covert metaphysical operations. As they examined the cemetery's disrupted energy patterns, Kuroka suddenly tensed. Feline instincts registering environmental change before conscious perception were being observed, she stated with quiet certainty, golden eyes scanning surroundings with predatory focus. Issei extended abyssal senses outward, confirming her assessment. Multiple observers, different positions, varying concealment techniques. He gestured subtly toward particular ancient maple tree. Primary surveillance focus from that direction. Sophisticated dimensional folding to minimize detection profile. Yusaka's expression hardened, protective instinct evident beneath diplomatic composure. Uninvited observers within my territory represents significant breach of established protocols. Rather than escalating immediately to confrontation, Issei suggested alternative approach. Let's continue our examination while implementing gradual containment perimeter. If these observers represent responsible parties, their reaction to discovery could provide valuable tactical information. They proceeded with apparent normalcy, continuing site examination while subtly establishing surveillance countermeasures and potential containment protocols. Tiamat created detectee on-field using draconic sensory techniques that appeared identical to standard analysis procedures but actually mapped observer positions with increasing precision. Meanwhile, Kuroka utilized Nekosho stealth capabilities to gradually reposition herself for potential interception. The observers maintained discipline initially, adjusting positions slightly as investigation proceeded but taking no overt action. Their concealment techniques demonstrated professional expertise, magical signatures suppressed, dimensional positioning optimized for observation without detection, communication methods undetectable through standard mystical monitoring. However, when Issei began implementing stabilization measures similar to previous sites, the observers' behavior changed significantly. Magical RGY gathered at multiple surveillance positions, communication frequency increased, and concealment priorities shifted toward potential combat configuration rather than continued observation. Their preparing action response, Tiamat warned through established telepathic link. Combat probability exceeds 80% based on energy accumulation patterns. Issei completed necessary stabiliza Chion sequence before addressing the developing confrontation. Rather than waiting for opponents to dictate engagement parameters, he implemented preemptive measure, extending abyssal influence to tempo. Rarely solidified dimensional boundaries throughout the cemetery. This seemingly defensive action actually eliminated the observers' dimensional folding advantage, forcing them to either retreat or manifest fully within normal space-time. The response came immediately. Reality rippled at 7 distinct locations as concealment measures collapsed under Issei's dimensional enforcement. Figures materialized throughout the cemetery. their appearances confirming earlier suspicions about unexpected faction involvement. The observers wore distinctive armor combining Nordic runic patterns with Eastern mystical components, hybrid design suggesting collaborative development between traditionally separate supernatural traditions. Their weapons similarly demonstrated cross-cultural magical engineering, tafts incorporating both Norse bindrunes and Sanskrit mantras, focused through crystalline structures of clearly non-terrestrial origin. Identify yourselves and explain your unauthorized presence in sovereign Kyoto territory, Yusaka commanded, Ninetales manifesting fully behind her as she dropped diplomatic pretense for direct sovereign authority. The apparent leader, distinguished by more elaborate armor configuration and central position, removed his helmet to reveal features confirming Nordic origin. Pale blonde hair, ice blue eyes, and facial structure characteristic of Asgardian aphilia. TED supernatural entities completed the unexpected faction identification. We observe only, he stated in heavily accented Japanese. No territorial violation intended. Matter concerns multiple real, beyond local sovereignty consideration. Unauthorized dimensional manipulation within Kyoto boundaries constitutes direct sovereignty violation regardless of intent, Yusaka countered, regal authority evident in both tone and posture. Your observation operation employs active magical implementations affecting local spiritual infrastructure. The Nordic leader's expression revealed momentary surprise at this specific accusation, suggesting possible disconnect between observation team and actual disruption implementers. This reaction provided valuable insight into operational structure, perhaps multiple teams with compartmentalized knowledge rather than unified command hierarchy. Our mandate covers observation only, he insisted, though his posture suggested preparation for potential conflict rather than diplomatic resolution. Implementation responsibilities rest elsewhere. This careful phrasing confirms suspicion of multi-team operation with distributed responsibility, classic approach for deniable operations involving multiple supernatural factions. The Nordic team likely represented single component within broader coalition, each element maintaining limited knowledge of overall operational parameters. Regardless of specific mandate, Issei interjected, strategic opportunity apparent, your presence provides valuable perspective. The disruptions we've been addressing. G represents sophisticated metaphysical engineering with potentially catastrophic implications. Shared information would benefit mutual interests in preventing uncontrolled dimensional instability. T. His approach, offering potential collaboration rather than immediate confrontation, visibly disrupted the Nordic team's response protocols. Their leader's expression shifted between suspicion, calculation, and reluctant consideration as he evaluated unscripted diplomatic opening against predetermined operational parameters. We are not authorized for information exchange, he finally stated, though his tone suggested personal assessment might differ from official position. Observation protocols specify non-intervention regardless of local countermeasures. Yet your team prepared combat respo. NSE when we implemented stabilization measures, Tiamat observed with ancient perceptiveness. Suggesting operational parameters include prevention of specific interference patterns rather than mere passive documentation. This assessment struck uncomfortably close to truth, based on the Nordic leader's momentary expression shift. Whatever their official mandate, the observation team clearly had contingency protocols for active intervention under certain circumstances, likely including prevention of the exact stabilization measures being implemented across Kyoto. Strategic inflection point PR. Essented itself. Potential diplomatic opening versus probable combat engagement. Issei assessed options with expanded consciousness developed through his transformation process, seeing branching probability paths extending from this moment. I propose limited information exchange, he suggested, diplomatic approach reflecting emerging emperor aspects of his nature. Specifically regarding conversion, CE manifestation mechanics and potential unintended consequences of current disruption patterns. Technical discussion without operational detail disclosure. This carefully structured proposal offer face-saving compromise, allowing the Nordic team to obtain valuable information about stabilization techniques without requiring disclosure of their own operational parameters. More importantly, it's readed opportunity for indirect intelligence gathering through seemingly cooperative technical discussion. The Nordic leader's internal conflict played visibly across his features, operational discipline versus practical opportunity. Predetermined protocols versus adaptive response to changing conditions. Finally, practical considerations appeared to win over rigid adherence to initial parameters. Limited technical exchange acceptable, he conceded with formal reluctance that barely masked actual relief. Under strict non-attribution protocols. Yasaka's expression indicated skepticism. Riga. RDING this sudden diplomatic breakthrough, but she recognized strategic value in Issei's approach. Neutral ground required for such exchange, she stipulated, maintaining sovereign authority. The temporal pavilion at Kyoto boundary headquarters would provide appropriate setting with necessary security protocols. This suggestion carried multiple strategic layers, offering ceremonial respect will ensuring any exchange occurred under Yukai surveillance, establishing formal diplomatic context that prevented easy resumption of covert operations, and positioning Yasaka's faction as facilitator rather than mere territorial defender. Arrangements were quickly established through formal diplomatic channels. The Nordic team would send 3 technical representatives while maintaining perimeter security. Yukai faction would provide neutral meeting space with appropriate protections, and Issei's group would share specific stabilization methodology information without revealing broader strategic assessments. As the Nordic team departed to communicate with their command structure, Yasaka turned to Issei with newfound respect. Impressive diplomatic maneuver. You transformed potential at engagement into intelligence gathering opportunity while maintaining positional advantage. More importantly, Kuroka added with professional assessment, you've disrupted their operational tempo. Whatever schedule they were maintaining now requires adjustment to accommodate unexpected diplomatic process. Tiamat nodded agreement. Classic draconic strategy. When confronting unknown adversary, change interaction parameters to reveal adaptive capabilities. How they respond to this diplomatic opening will provide significant insight into their command flexibility and true objectives. The remainder of day proceeded with seemingly paradoxical combination of continued stabilization operations and preparation for diplomatic meeting. They completed examination of 3 additional disruption sites, implementing temporary countermeasures at each while gathering technical data for pending information exchange. By evening, they had returned to Yukai headquarters to prepare for the diplomatic meeting scheduled for midnight, traditional neutral time for supernatural negotiations. The temporal pavilion referenced by Yasaka proved to be architectural marvel combining traditional Japanese aesthetic with sophisticated metaphysical engineering. This structure exists simultaneously across 3 temporal states, Yasaka explained as they toured the facility. Present configuration, historical foundation from 8th century, and potential future manifestation. The temporal overlap creates unique properties particularly suited for cross-factional diplomatic functions. Neutralizing conventional magical advantages, Tiamat observed with professional appreciation. Precognitive abilities function unpredictably here. Temporal manipulation spells destabilize under conflicting reference frames. And recording enchantments struggle with overlapping reality states. Precisely, Yasaka confirmed, making it ideal location for sensitive discussions where all parties require assurance against unfair magical advantages. Preparations continued through evening, with Issei focusing on specific technical aspects he could share without compromising strategic position. The stabilization methodology itself provided valuable demonstration of his capabilities without revealing their full extent, calculated display of significant but not alarming power. Shortly before midnight, Kuno A.P. paired unexpectedly, technically violating protocol regarding diplomatic preparation but exercising heir's prerogative with childish determination. She found Issei reviewing technical diagrams in preparation room adjacent to main pavilion. Mother says I can't attend the meeting, she announced without preamble, disappointment evident in her expression. Even though I've been studying dimensional theory with Master Hifumi for 2 whole seasons. Issei smiled at this solemn declaration of academic qualification. Diplomatic meetings can be terribly boring, he confided. Lots of formal lingua, and careful phrasing where nobody says exactly what they mean. I know, she sighed dramatically. But how am I supposed to learn leadership if I'm always sent away when important things happen? The genuine frustration behind her childish complaint revealed deeper concern, awareness of her future responsibilities and desire to prepare adequately. Rather than dismissing her interest as mere childish curiosity, Issei recognized legitimate aspiration toward effective leadership development. Perhaps we could arrange comprehensive briefing afterward, he suggested. Not just official summary but actual strategic assessment, including why certain approaches were chosen over alternatives. Kuno's expression brightened considerably at this offer of genuine inclusion rather than patronizing dismissal. You'd really explain everything, even the parts adults usually say I'll understand when I'm older. Within security parameters your mother approves, he qualified responsibly. But yes, treating your questions with appropriate seriousness rather than age-based deflection. This promise clearly meant more to the young heir than Issei had anticipated. Her solemn nod carried genuine, nay appreciation beyond childish gratification. Thank you. Most adults forget that understanding comes from information and explanation, not just from getting older. This insightful observation from someone so young reinforced Issei's impression of Kuno as remarkably perceptive despite her age. Before he could respond appropriately, Yusaka appeared at the doorway, affectionate exasperation evident in her expression. Kuno, you were supposed to be completing evening studies with tutor Mizuki, she chided gently. I wanted to wish Emperor Issei good luck in the negotiations, the girl explained with innocent expression that didn't quite mask deliberate evasion of academic responsibilities. And now you have, her mother responded with patient firmness. Studies await, young lady. A.F. Chair Kuno departed with theatrical reluctance. Yusaka turned apologetic expression toward Issei. I hope she didn't disrupt your preparations. She has boundless curiosity about new visitors, particularly those connected to significant events. Not disruptive at all, he assured her. Actually quite insightful. She shows remarkable awareness of leadership responsibilities for someone her age. Yusaka's expression softened, maternal pride momentarily displacing leader's composure. She's had to grow up faster than I would wish. Being sole heir to factional leadership creates unique pressures, particularly with her father no longer present. This oblique reference to Kuno's absent father carried emotional weight that transcended mere biographical information. Though expressed with practiced composure, genuine pain lingered beneath diplomatic phrasing, personal loss overlaid with leadership responsibilities that allowed no visible vulnerability. Before Issei could respond appropriately, why to this unexpected personal disclosure, Tiamat appeared to announce the Nordic representatives had arrived. The moment passed, but the brief glimpse of Yusaka's personal reality beyond official purrs. Ona added significant dimension to his understanding of Kyoto's leader. The diplomatic meeting proceeded with elaborate supernatural protocols, mutual recognition rituals, power equalization agreements, and formal truth-binding spells that prevented deliberate falsehood without compelling unwanted disclosure. These established supernatural negotiation frameworks reflected centuries of refinement across factional interactions. Nordic representatives presented more diverse group than expected, leader from Asgardian military tradition accompanied by Eastern-trained runic specialist and human airing technician whose aura suggested non-standard supernatural classification. This combination reinforced earlier assessment of multi-factional coalition rather than purely Nordic operation. Technical discussion began with carefully structured exchange regarding disruption patterns observed throughout Kyoto. Nordic representatives initially maintained rigid adherence to information reception without reciprocal disclosure, standard asymmetric intelligence gathering approach. However, Issei's presentation strategy gradually necessitated more substantive engagement from their side. The disruption harmonic frequencies demonstrate logarithmic progression toward dimensional resonance threshold, he explained, displaying complex mathematical representation of affected energy patterns. With chi dampening countermeasures targeting these specific sub-harmonic clusters, cascade failure becomes mathematically inevitable beyond critical transition point. This technically precise framing required response from Nordic specialists to maintain credible information exchange. Their runic expert reluctantly contributed clarifying question that revealed significant knowledge of underlying mechanics. CS. Have you observed temporal dilation effects within tertiary harmonic manifestations? Traditional models suggest time-space folding precedes full-dimensional breach. This seemingly innocent technical question actually disclosed sophisticated understanding of progression patterns associated specifically with convergence manifestations rather than standard dimensional manipulation. Such Liz's knowledge confirmed their operation's true focus despite continued diplomatic obfuscation. The exchange continued with similar pattern, Issei providing accurate but carefully framed technical information about stabilization methodology while structuring presentation to elicit revealing responses from Nordic specialists. Through this indirect approach, significant intelligence emerged regarding both their technical capabilities and strategic objectives without apparent compromise of operational security. Key insight emerged approximately 2 hours into technical discussion, when Nordic technician reflexively corrected mathematical calculation regarding energy distribution patterns. His correction inadvertently revealed familiarity with specific convergence manifestation variables documented in only one known historical source, the Dragon Conclave archives supposedly destroyed during medieval period. This slip confirmed suspicion that their operation drew upon restricted historical documentation rather than theoretical extrapolation. More concerning, it suggested access to information sources previously believed eliminated specifically to prevent recurrence of catastrophic manifestation attempts from ancient past. As meeting concluded with formal diplomatic pleasantries masking substantive tension, Issei's group had gathered significant intelligence without compromising their own strategic position. The Nordic representatives departed with technically valuable information about stabilization methodologies but without broader strategic insight into Kyoto faction's actual capabilities or intentions. They know far more about convergence mechanics than should be possible given available historical documentation, Tiamat observed once privacy wards confirmed their conversation security. Their technical familiarity with specific manifestation variables suggests access to restricted archive materials previously thought destroyed. More concerning, Yusaka added, their operation demonstrates resources beyond standard factional allocation for theoretical research. Implementation across multiple sites simultaneously requires significant personnel and material investment. Kuroka, who had maintained silent observation role throughout diplomatic exchange, contributed practical assessment. They're working toward specific timetable. The technical specialist showed stress indicators whenever discussion approached manifestation sequence timing, suggesting schedule pressure rather than mere experimental investigation. These observations coalesced into disturbing conclusion. Sophisticated multi-factional operation with access to restricted historical documentation was methodically establishing conditions for controlled convergence manifestation within specific timeframe. Not theoretical research but practical implementation toward concrete objective. We've disrupted their immediate progress, Issei noted, considering strategic implications. The stabilization measures we've implemented will require them to recalibrate entire operation rather than merely continue established pattern. That creates opportunity for more comprehensive intervention before they can adapt. Yusaka nodded agreement. The diplomatic engagement buys additional time by establishing formal recognition protocols that complicate resumed covert operations. However, we expect accelerated timetable once they've adjusted approach to account for our interference. Strategic planning continued late into night, establishing comprehensive response protocols for both immediate site security and longer-term monitoring systems. Yusaka mobilized additional Yukai resources toward affected locations, while Issei's group developed specialized detection methodologies are getting specific operational signatures identified during their investigations. By dawn, provisional security framework had been established across Kyoto's spiritual infrastructure, not perfect protection, but significant improvement over previous vulnerability. More importantly, they had established clear understanding of threat parameters and likely progression patterns, allowing for targeted than reactive response to future developments. As they concluded immediate crisis management, Yusaka expressed formal appreciation through traditional Yukai ceremony, presentation of ceremonial scroll establishing recognized alliance between Kyoto faction and the Supreme Dragon Emperor of the Abyss. This formalization represented significant diplomatic development. First official recognition of Issei's status by established supernatural power structure outside the three factions. Beyond formal acknowledgement, Yusaka explained as ceremony concluded, this establishes mutual support protocols that transcend immediate crisis. The Kyoto faction recognizes your legitimacy as emerging power center within supernatural ecosystem, significant precedent for potential recognition from other independent factions. The political implications extended beyond immediate tactical concerns. By establishing formal alliance with neutral major faction, Issei gained legitimacy that complicated three factions. Potential containment strategies. Diplomatic recognition created obligations and expectations within supernatural community that couldn't be simply ignored through unilateral action. We appreciate both practical assistance and formal recognition, Issei responded with appropriate ceremony. The alliance benefits mutual interests beyond current circumstances. As formal proceedings concluded and preparations began for their return journey, Yusaka requested private conversation, departure from official protocols suggesting personal rather than purely diplomatic communication. They walked together through secluded garden where cherry trees displayed unseasonable blossoms, supernatural energy affecting natural cycles in subtle ways. Beyond official matters, Yusaka began once privacy was assured. I wished to express personal gratitude. Your intervention provided protection not merely for Kyoto's spiritual infrastructure but for my daughter's future security. That carries significance beyond diplomatic calculation. Quote, the genuine emotion behind this statement revealed deeper dimension to Yusaka's perspective. Beyond faction leadership responsibilities, maternal protection. Instinct clearly motivated significant portion of her decision-making process, understanding that helped contextualize both her proactive approach to emerging threats and willingness to establish unconventional alliances. Kuno is fortunate to have leader and mother so dedicated to her well-being, Issei replied, recognizing both aspects of Yusaka's dual responsibilities. The combination creates unique challenges. She acknowledged with rare personal candor. Leadership requires projection of unwavering strength while parenthood demands vulnerability and emotional availability. Balancing the seemingly contradictory requirements proves complicated. This glimpse beyond diplomatic persona revealed Yusaka as more complex individual than her perfect composure typically allowed. Leader carrying weight of factional responsibility while simultaneously navigating personal challenges of single parenthood during politically volatile period. The humanizing aspect created connection beyond formal alliance considerations. Perhaps that balance itself represents strength rather than contradiction, Issei suggested. Understanding both perspectives simultaneously likely provides insight unavailable to leaders without such personal connections. Yusaka's expression suggested this perspective offered meaningful reframing of what she had perceived as weakness requiring careful concealment. Before she could respond, Kuno appeared along garden path, clearly having escaped tutorial supervision yet again in quest for more interesting activities. Mother, I've been looking everywhere, the young heir exclaimed breathlessly. Are Emperor Issei and his friends really leaving already? But they just got here. Diplomatic visits follow different timelines than personal ones, Yusaka explained with practiced patience. And proper forms of address include titles, remember. Kuno straightened with exaggerated formality. Are His Imperial Majesty the Supreme Dragon Emperor of the Abai SS and his distinguished companions truly departing our humble territory at this early juncture, most honorable Lady Mother? The elaborate overcorrection delivered with perfect innocent expression caused unexpected laugh to escape Yusaka, genuine amusement breaking through leadership composure. The sound transformed her completely, momentarily revealing younger, less burdened version of herself. Rarely visible beneath leaders' necessary gravity. Precisely that level of formality, yes, she agreed, affectionate exasperation evident as she smoothed her daughter's slightly disheveled hair. Perhaps with less theatrical delivery. This brief family moment provided context that formal diplomatic interactions typically obscured, reminder that supernatural leaders remained individuals with personal connections despite cosmic responsibilities. Issei found this humanizing glimpse more valuable than many formal briefings for understanding Yusaka's true priorities and potential future decisions. As preparations concluded and departure time approached, Yusaka presented final gift beyond formal alliance documentation, small crystal containing condensed version of Kyoto's spiritual topography. Specially calibrated to maintain connection across significant distance. For communication purposes primarily, she explained as Issei accepted the artifact. But also symbolic representative of continued connection between our respective domains. Should further developments require consultation or mutual response, this provides direct access beyond standard diplomatic channels. The practical utility masked deeper significance, establishing personal connection between leaders rather than merely formal alliance between factions. This approach reflected Yasaka's apparent governing philosophy. Relationships between individuals ultimately proved more durable than abstract agreements between organizational entities. Their departure from Kyoto proceeded through established diplomatic protocols, formal farewell ceremony, escort to specialized transportation nexus, and carefully structured transition that maintained both security and appropriate ceremonial requirements. As dimensional pathways engaged for return journey, Issei's final view of Kyoto showed Yasaka and Kuno standing together against backdrop of ancient capital, mother and daughter, leader and heir, individuals whose personal relationship transcended their official roles. The image lingered as transportation magic carried them homeward, reminding Issei that supernatural politics ultimately comprised individuals making decisions based on complex personal motivations rather than abstract factional imperatives. This perspective would prove increasingly valuable as his own role within supernatural ecosystem continued evolving beyond traditional categorization. Kyoto's Golden Guardian had provided not merely formal alliance but essential perspective on balancing personal connection with cosmic responsibility. Why? Lesson perhaps more valuable than any tactical advantage gained through their intervention. As Supreme Dragon Emperor of the Abyss navigating unprecedented evolutionary path, understanding this NCE would prove critical to maintaining authentic self amid extraordinary transformation. Chapter 2 End. The End. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.